Folks, it's 5 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm just glad to see everybody survived the winter weather we had. And so I know the school staff has had a lot on their plate in the last few days trying to juggle schedules and everything. And Stan, I know your folks have been working very hard too. We appreciate everything. Okay. All right. First order of business is to approve the agenda that's in front of you. Is there any changes or anything? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
All right, got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All right. All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the last board meeting. Two meetings. Give you a chance to look over those.
Move approval.
Okay, got a motion? Got a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on down to item number 4, discussion, presentation from Dixon, Hughes, and Goodman. I believe that's you, sir. That is me. All right, come forward.
All right, well, I hope everybody's on. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hope you guys are doing well today. It seems like it's finally warming up a little bit, doesn't it?
Thank goodness.
So I'm Tyler Beatty. I am a manager with Dixon Hughes Goodman, who's the accounting firm who does your audit. I sit in the Pinehurst office, and this was my 4th year working on the audit engagement for Beaufort County Schools. First and foremost, I'd like to start out by thanking Willie Mack and his entire team for the help they provided during this year's audit. If any of you have been through an audit before, you know us auditors can be pretty burdensome at times, and the finance team was extremely easy to work with, and they were able to provide all the information when we needed it. And I think it's also important to note that the LGC has accepted the audit as of November 17th, and the audit has also been submitted and accepted by the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And this was a very good improvement from the prior year, as the reports weren't submitted until January. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to try to spend 15 minutes going through things. We'll walk through the discussion of the audit results, the review letter to the board. We'll review some financial highlights, and then we'll do a quick review of the compliance audit. So on the first slide is an excerpt from our audit opinion. All of the hard work that everyone contributes to the audit, the reason for it's primarily to enable us to issue an opinion on the financial statements. Once again, on this slide is an excerpt of our audit opinion, which is considered an unmodified opinion, which is what you want. And what this does is it enables financial statement users, it gives them an indication that the information is materially accurate in the financial statements, and they can use that to kind of benchmark and compare your financial statements with other boards of education across the state. And our entire auditor's report can be found on page 1 in the financial statements. So the second thing we'll look at is the communications report to the board. I have 2 bound copies of reports that we'll provide at the end of this board meeting. The first is the financial statements, and the second is this review letter to the board. In that letter, there's a few things that are outlined that we're required to communicate to you guys as the board. The first being our responsibilities as it relates to the audit, and that is that the audit is based on generally accepted accounting standards and also the OMB uniform guidance. These generally accepted auditing standards dictate the standards we must allow when performing the audit, and the uniform guidance governs the compliance work around the audit. The second thing we would disclose here are any significant estimates or sensitive disclosures. We've identified the sensitive disclosures and significant estimates in the audit as being the useful lives of depreciable assets, and also the proponent share of the net pension liability for the teachers and state employees retirement system. We would also communicate in this letter any difficulties or disagreements we had during the audit. There were no difficulties or disagreement with management that we had. Also, we would report any uncorrected misstatements. Uncorrected misstatements would be things we found during the audit process that we thought should be adjusted, and when we gave that to management, they decided not to make the adjustment. We did have journal entries that we found as a result of the audit, but they were all made by management, and we didn't have any uncorrected misstatements that were presented in this letter. And the last thing in this letter that you'll see is the management representation letter, and this is just extra information so you guys can see the representations that were given by management to us during the audit. Also part of this communications report is our internal controls report. And as part of the audit each year, we are required to assess internal controls as it relates to financial reporting. And this includes the IT controls and processes relevant to that financial reporting. In the current year, we worked with our DHG IT auditors to perform an assessment of the IT controls relevant to financial reporting. And these results indicate a list of opportunities for improvement that the board should consider. In that report, you'll find the findings are being tiered, with the tier 1 being the highest priority. And once again, a listing of all these deficiencies can be found on page 5 of the communications report. And it's probably also important to add that the findings that we found related to your information technology controls were consistent with all of our Board of Education clients. So now we'll dive into the financial results. I mean, this is slide 6. If you guys are trying to thumb through and follow me, I know I'm going kind of quick. And so I think a big thing, when you're thumbing through the financial statements, you'll notice that they only provide information for the current fiscal year. And what I've tried to do on these next several slides is to pull out the relevant information from the financial statements, but also include the current year and the prior 2 fiscal years to provide a tool for benchmarking and assessment. The first slide is the snapshot of the general fund, which would be your Fund 2, and also your restricted revenue fund, which is Fund 8. Cash at June 30th, 2017 was $2.6 million compared to $2 million in 2016 and $2.4 million in 2015. The increase in the year was due, obviously, to access revenues over expenditures, which the increase in fund balance was also due to the net changes realized in the current year. Revenues from Beaufort County, which is recorded in Fund 2, increased around $1 million, which was the driving factor for the increase in fund balance. And Fund 2 balance appropriated for fiscal year 2017 is $339,000. And what that means is the board plans to use that fund balance in operations for 2017, which didn't occur. So you guys plan to use $339,000 in 17, and you didn't have to dip into that fund balance for last year. And for fiscal year 18, the board anticipates using around $350,000 of this fund balance. And by the way, stop me for questions. We'll have a time for questions at the end, but if anything comes up, feel free to stop me and we'll move from there.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
What are considered true revenues? When you say revenues, how does that may be a question I need to be asking.
No.
What do we consider revenues?
So from a Fund 2 and a Fund 8 perspective, the majority of revenues in Fund 2 would be like local monies, local appropriations from the county. And then in Fund 8, it would be state, federal, or any type of local revenues that are considered a special revenue that wouldn't flow through like your regular state allocations, which would be Fund 1, or your regular federal programs, which would be Fund 3.
Right, and those flow through.
Your local grants are usually in Fund 8.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted.
No, of course. Yeah, so Fund 2 is primarily just that county, your county appropriation. Then Fund 8 is kind of your catch-all.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So moving on, the next slide is the State Public School Fund, and this is where the majority of your state monies are accounted for. This fund is balanced each year, which means that no fund balance is maintained, and your revenues and expenditures will always be the same. The state public school fund did recognize an increase of around 1.1 million this year. However, the increase was related to personnel increases and salary and benefit increases, which were mandated by the state. So while it looks like you received more, you really didn't receive any additional monies that the board had liberty or any control over. The next slide is detailing your federal grants fund, which once again is the majority of where your federal monies are accounted for. This fund is also balanced each year and does not maintain a fund balance. You'll recognize a decrease of around $480,000 in revenue for federal grants, which percentage-wise is consistent with what we're seeing around the state. With the ARA money moving out, we would expect the Fund 3 or federal grants to stabilize a little bit, but given the political climate, you could see continued decreases as well in federal monies. So this next slide details some information from the Capital Outlay Fund. Your Capital Outlay Fund is the fund that's used to account for any capital projects that are being concurred at the board. The cash balance at June 30, 2017 decreased to $675,000 from around $1.4 million in the previous year. But the decrease is probably more so due to the timing of capital projects and when the funding is received, as well as the year-end date. And all of the fund balance is restricted each year for ongoing capital projects. And what I mean by that is we usually see capital outlay funds fluctuate from year to year, and usually why it fluctuates is if the board's received money for before June 30th, but the capital project hasn't started, it'll increase that revenue, but then the money's spent. It looks like that's what happened between June 30th, 2016 and June 30th, 2017. Oh, yeah. So we'll move on to the next slide. So this next slide, what it's trying to do is give you a visual representation of each funding source for each fund for the prior 3 years. General funding was around $16.3 million, federal funding was around $4.7 million, and state funding was around $41.1 million for June 30th, 2017. And what it shows, it gives you a good representation of how much the board relies on state funding. And this is the primary reason it's hard to budget for a school year until your state allocations are finalized. So this next slide, once again, is trying to give you a visual representation of where monies are being spent each year. And you'll notice that the board has consistently spent around 75 or 76% on instructional services, with the remaining 25 and 24% being spent on operational services. And what we look at as auditors is we would like to see consistency each year on the type of expenditures being spent. And that's kind of what this slide indicates, that you're consistent from year to year. So this next slide is detailing the fund balances for the prior 3 years for the general and restricted revenue funds. And as I said prior, the board has appropriated $350,000 in Fund 2 fund balance for fiscal year 2018, and the entire Fund 8 fund balance of $790,000 is shown as restricted for special programs. The unassigned fund balance is $1.3 million at 6/30/2017. And the board increased its fund balance from the previous year, and it was primarily related to those increases in county funding. The next slide, this slide gives you a visual representation of the percentage of fund balance to your expenditures. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at your fund balance on hand and what percentage that is to your total expenditures. And what this presents is that currently the unassigned fund balance represents almost a month in operating expenditures. So if all allocations were to cease, you could operate for about a month on your fund balance. And it's pretty consistent with what we see across the board. It's about 1 month. With some of our larger LEAs, they operate at an even lower benchmark. And then finally, this is a snapshot of the Child Nutrition Fund. Net position at the end of the year was $960,000, which was relatively consistent to the prior 2 years. Once again, as we've seen with many LEAs, operating revenues are continuing to decline due to the drop in participation in the program by students, and that's mostly attributable to the healthy food regulations. With this, LEAs are having to cut operating expenditures, which, as you can see, you guys did in the current year. And then lastly, we'll go through the compliance audit. So as part of our government auditing standards, we're required to evaluate the board's compliance with laws and regulations, any contracts and agreements such as grant agreements. Included in the financial statement is what is known as our Yellow Book report, which summarizes the result of this. As part of our Yellow Book compliance audit, we noted 2 findings, which both were considered significant deficiencies. The first finding was related to liability accounts and that they should be reconciled during the month-end closing process. During our audit, there were several adjustments that were needed to be made to the liability accounts, some of which the finance team brought to our attention and other which we identified. And based on our audit, it appeared to be related to some hardships still going through with the Link software, as well as continuing to learn the system. The second finding we had, which was also a significant deficiency, is that cash accounts should be reconciled during the month-end closing process, and any discrepancy should be resolved and timely investigated. And once again, this seemed to be related to the Link conversion, and also you guys pulled accounts in the same, you pulled different fund cash accounts in the same bank statement, so it was harder to reconcile cash. And from our conversations since year end, I think cash accounts are being reconciled since they've been pulled out. And once again, I know the finance team is working hard to rectify both those situations. And in the financial statements, you can see the board's response and the corrective action plan that's on page 57 of the financial statements. As part of the compliance audit, we're also required to evaluate the board's compliance with federal programs that are deemed to be major. This year we noted a cluster of programs known as the Child Nutrition Cluster, which was considered major, as well as the supporting effective instruction state grants that was required to be audited. Supporting effective instruction state grants was previously improving teacher quality. They changed the name, if you guys aren't familiar with that. We did have one finding which was considered a significant deficiency for the Child Nutrition Cluster, and it was related to a semi-annual report known as the FC1A report, which is supposed to be filed by a March 1st deadline, and it wasn't filed. And during our testing, we noted that this was primarily related to some disconnect around the filing guidelines between the Child Nutrition Director and North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Once again, this finding was also prevalent at some of our other LEAs, so it's something that seemed to be, recurring with some of our other child nutrition directors and NCDPI. And once again, you can see the board's response and the corrective action in page 57 of the financial statements.
That was the one that was also tied to links and reconciling the 2 softwares, the Meals Plus as well as Link. Child Nutrition was working with the state to get it reconciled. Rather than go ahead and file a report, she wanted to be perfect before she submitted it. She should have submitted the report, and we should have submitted an amended report later to meet the deadline.
She knows to do that now.
Yes.
And then lastly, we're also required to evaluate the board's compliance with state programs that are deemed to be major. We noted one program in the current year that was considered major and was required to be audited. That was the State Public School Fund, and we didn't have any findings to report related to that fund. So then now I'll open it up for questions from everybody.
Does anyone have any questions?
All right, perfect.
Seeing none, I'm assuming you're expecting us to entertain a motion to accept this report this time?
I would hope so.
You would hope so.
I
Would you
would.
like to stay to see that happen tonight, sir?
I got a 3-hour drive home and a 5-day kid at home. So
Okay,
my wife
all
would
right.
probably be very happy if you guys.
Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, and like I said, Willie's got copies of the reports in his office.
And we'll give them to you
guys.
before you leave tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the findings.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. No further discussion? All in
Thank
favor
you.
of this motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Dr. Phillips wants to make a comment, but the motion passed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Willie Mack, that because the public and the folks that are watching don't have the documents in front of them, and I know that we've talked quite a bit about what the findings were, could you just in a thumbnail explain in common everyday terms like I would understand, and then what we're doing so that folks know that we take it seriously and that we've got things in place to make sure that what were issues in the past aren't going to be issues in the future?
The liability accounts in which he's referring to have to be reconciled or closed out each year. There were particular items that over the time with the software had posted into those accounts that we could not clearly identify what they were. So we've been trying to research those out. We know that anything that we hold in a liability account that we do not close at June 30th, we have to clearly identify every penny that's in that account. So Erica, who handles those accounts, is working to reconcile those each month so we can identify next year. We should have 3. Most of them are going to be related to insurances that we hold over the summer months when they start back to school. So those are those liability accounts that we need to clearly identify whose monies or whose for each of those employees. The bank statements, even though we're paying a little bit more on our service charges at the bank, as Tyler mentioned, one of the hardest things that we had in resolving the issues with the mergers and the software was that all the bank accounts or all the funds were in one bank account, and it was hard to identify which one had the problem. So we have separated them out. They have been kept current. The state bank account, Tammy was able to reconcile within an hour today by having those, which they're already cleared out, but we've set up details and when we submit a report to Raleigh, when it comes down, so we know that that one should be in the bank statement that we're reconciling to. And the last one, the third one was the child nutrition piece, which hopefully we have posted the closing entries or the adjusting entries for the audit. We are now in the process of running reports to make sure that our general ledger balances to the penny to the ones that are in your audit report. Once we've done that, then we will sit down with the child nutrition director and go over to make sure her Meals Plus software mimics our findings, so when she does run her reports, that they truly match, and she can go ahead and get her reports into Raleigh in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a safe trip. Okay. All right. Moving down to item number 2 under heading 4 on action makeup days. Dr. Phipps.
If you would refer to the printed calendar that I've handed out to you, and the public can see this online if they want to take a look, if you can follow. We'll have something written up and submitted for folks to take a look at, for the public to see what our makeup days are going to be. We just announced, as we started our meeting at 5 o'clock, the call rolled, we are not going to have school tomorrow for students. And I hate to say that. I know that the majority of folks, when they go out and about, it looks like the roads are clear and dry. There are several roads around the county and all portions of the county that are still covered by snow and slush. And it's going to be at least 4-hour freeze tonight. There's going to be a problem again in the morning. I just don't feel comfortable having a high school student, one of our teachers, or a bus out there. So we're going to do a 2-hour delay, optional teacher workday tomorrow, but it'll be another day out for students. With that in mind, we're trying to go ahead and put some things together. If you agree with and follow the Farmer's Almanac, which I think has about an 80% success, they're calling for some more snow in early February. So we're saying what we're saying right now to address what our concerns are and trying to address the 5 days. We've got 5 days counting tomorrow that students have been out of school. And when we build our calendar, when we do the calendar committee work, we're required to have 185 instructional days or 1,025 instructional hours. And we build more instructional hours in than that, knowing that we can pull from that and we don't have to make up everything. So we generally have about 4 days of makeup that we've got in our calendar. What I'm going to propose to you tonight, if you'll follow with me, In the month of January, there are 2 days in red there, the 1st of January and the 15th. The 15th is Martin Luther King Day. That's a state holiday that we're not going to touch, we can't touch. The purple day is a required work day. That's the one required work day that folks have asked for because it marks the difference, the change between semester 1 and semester 2. And we don't feel comfortable getting rid of that. But what we do feel like we need to do is that this week we were going through our preparations for final exams. We've not had the opportunity to do that. Several teachers and students and parents have expressed some concern that students aren't going to have adequate time when they come back to get through exams. And we're also trying to look at a balance of the first semester and the second semester in terms of the total number of days. So this is what I'm proposing. And we met with our high school principals twice today to make sure that we were on the same page. We'd like to make the required workday that's scheduled on the 21st of January become the 26th of January, which will be a Friday. And I'll explain that. The reason why is that our first semester, which right now ends on the 22nd, would end on the 25th. And that would give us a few more days for students to get prepared and for teachers to do the exam. It would also balance the semesters. The high school and middle school exam dates aren't on the calendar. I guess you could look down at the bottom. They were originally January 16th through 22nd. We're going to move those to the 19th through the 25th to give us a little bit more breathing room. That means that the exams have to be the last 5 days of the grading period, so that would be the 19th through the 25th. The 25th would be reserved as a makeup day for exams, and then we would be out on the 26th for a required teacher work day for the teachers to do the changeover from semester 1 to semester 2. Then when you take a look at student days that we have to make up, we're recommending that we take away the optional teacher work day in February the 19th. That become a regular student day. And that we also take away the optional teacher work day in March the 9th. That becomes a student work day, regular student day. And the early release day that we had for professional development on April the 30th, we make that a full day, which would get us not quite half of the hours that we have to get. And we have enough hours in our schedule, as I mentioned earlier, to cover the rest of the missed instructional time if we don't have any more weather. If we have more weather and we miss more days, we're going to have to come back to you, and our only options, there are 3 options at that point. Start to take away spring break, which we don't want to do, go to school on Saturdays, which we don't want to do, or lengthen the school day, which we really prefer not to do either. So what we're hoping for is that we get through a mild rest of the winter and spring, but very likely we're going to have to be dealing with some things. Just so you know, and so the public knows, if our bus is run and we release early for weather, that day is counted as a complete day. However, if we have a delay and we don't start school for 2 hours because of weather, we have to make those 2 hours up. So we're going back to make sure that we've addressed every hour that we've missed so that our instructional day meets the minimum requirement that the state has in place for us. But we do all of this in our planning, and sometimes folks will look at work days and they may wonder why we've got them scattered. This is why we do that, because we know we're going to need them at some point in time. So that's our recommendation that we're making for you now. The early college would come back with an updated calendar, but we haven't had a chance to sit down with them to go over that yet.
So with these days you're talking about, we're good until
We're good on
we get-
instructional time. That's
What
right.
happens again?
Till Frosty peeks his little head out there again.
And the only thing I didn't mention was we're required to have teachers work 215 days, and they missed the Thursday and Friday of last week, and we made some optional work days this week. What we're going to have them do is make up that time with their supervisor, principal or supervisor, and we'll make sure that we've got those hours taken care of so that the time will work like it should. If we have to, we can add optional work days at the end of the school year, but by following what I'm proposing right now, we'll be where we need to be as we sit in the room today. Again, not knowing what's going to happen down the road.
So the first thing that families need to know is that's going to affect them. We're not going to touch the 15th. I thought Veterans Day was the only one we couldn't touch.
Well, we've got to give state holidays.
Okay.
Veterans Day is the only day that we're not allowed to go to school, but because this is a state holiday, we have to
Going to go ahead and
recognize it.
observe it. Okay, it's the 23rd. That'll
That's
be the
right.
first day that families currently think they'll be off and they'll be going to school.
But that day will become the 26th, which is a Friday.
Okay.
Just move it over.
That's right.
But if we have more snow between now and then, hopefully we don't. Well, I'm not going to borrow that. Never mind.
Just don't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't speak it.
Right, okay.
With that in mind, the other 2 days that families have probably looked at for a variety of reasons, we're not going to be out of school on the 19th of February, and we're not going to be out on the 9th of March. Those days are now going to be student days. So we've pretty much taken away, and if you look at the calendar, there's not another work day on the calendar before students get out. We normally have a couple of days at the end of the year but the state law says we have to end on the Friday closest to June the 11th. And if you look, we're getting out on Friday the 8th. There's not another day to add there. We'd have to get special permission to go longer than that. We hope we don't have to do that.
And Dr. Phipps, have you had any conversation with our state legislators? I know we all probably got that email from Ramona about contacting them when they were going back for a session about the school calendars as it is.
I haven't in the last couple of weeks, but we will. That continues to be priority number
Yeah,
one.
is it such that we could send some sort of resolution or just request that they consider the hardship that they put on counties such as ourselves?
We can. And what I wanted to do was to exhaust the work days that we had, and we've done that tonight. So what we're saying is we're going to use the banked hours, for lack of a better term. I'd like to ask them if they would consider waiving any of that time for us, so that we'd have that back.
What you had said about the exam schedules, I had a lot of that feedback, high school parents being concerned that kids wouldn't be ready. And one of them pointed out to me this morning, it goes right back to how much better it was when exams and the semester ended before
That's right.
Christmas.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be in this situation, we'd be in the situation of making up the time, but not the concern that we have for the high school students.
That's right.
We would have more flexibility.
Right.
Yep. Okay, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do I have a motion to accept? Move approval. Second. All right, got a motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passed.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
could say, the hardest decision that I have to make as a superintendent, without question, it deals with weather. And the reason for that is that a lot of those decisions have to be made early. And what I've tried to do is to make a decision so that families know what's going on before they put their children down for bed. Now, everybody's batting 1,000 at 9 o'clock in the morning. They see what has happened with the weather. I'm looking at the National Weather Service. We've got several different subscriptions that we use. I talked to meteorologists. We talked with emergency management. So we're trying to make a decision down to the hour if we can. I'm going to always err on the side of caution. And what I don't want to have, tomorrow's a great example. 99% of our roads may be fine. If we get a high school student that goes out and hits a slippery road and they end up in the ditch or something happens to a school bus, I have a hard time reconciling that in terms of what we could have done. And that doesn't mean that there'll be a normal day where a child won't hit a patch of water and something happens. Things are going to go on like that. But whatever control we've got to try to be as conservative and safe, I'm going to always err on that side. And I'd much rather take the calls from folks tomorrow who say it's sunny and the roads are clear. I want to explain to them that we've got the entire county that we're dealing with. If it were possible to be able to say we'd have everybody on a normal schedule except for a couple of schools, we would do that. But the way that we work with the early college and our Ed Tech Center, we have students that really cross school boundaries, and it's just not possible. So I just ask for folks' patience and understanding. I don't want any days out, but we're going to do what we have to do to ensure the safety of our students and adults.
Well, there's one certainty in life is that there are Monday morning quarterbacks. So I think you do a great job as far as having to mitigate the possible, like you say, running into the ditches.
Well, I'll be honest, it seems like every time I've questioned your decision, it seems like your decision was right.
There's your quarterback right there.
I don't want to think, really? And then get up the next morning, there's snow on the ground, and so.
The problem is the folks forget those 99, and they remember the one that was there. That's what we get. But I just want everybody to understand, we're in this together, and we're trying to do the right thing.
If the worst decision we make is to err on the side of caution, we're doing pretty
That's right.
daggone good.
The other thing that I wanted to mention to our folks that have either been on a calendar committee or could be on a calendar committee in the future, sometimes when we're going through this, it's sort of an initial, it's a kind of an automatic response to say, let's put a teacher work day either at the beginning or ending of a holiday period to make it a longer stretch for employees. And I don't think our calendar ought to be built in a way that it just benefits employees. It ought to be what's best for students. But the reason why we sprinkle days around is it breaks up the long stretches, but it also allows us, we've had one day in the fall with tropical weather. We generally have that more than we have winter weather. But that's why we pepper the calendar with those work days to allow us to have time to make up like we're doing now. So I wish they could all stay and that people could plan that way, but unfortunately they're not able to. And I appreciate your support and understanding what we're trying to accomplish.
Remember, Don, if it was easy, everybody could do it.
Well, we appreciate everything you and your staff are doing. You don't get thanked enough, but we do appreciate it. Okay, next item is field trips, Dr. Phipps.
Have a couple that are on there.
Okay.
And I'd ask you to consider these all together. I'll go through them. 10-9-5-6 is a Northside field trip April the 27th to 28th. It's the Science Club, Cedar Rock Park. It's the Envirothon competition, and they'll be taking an activity bus, appropriate number of adults there. The one below that is NC State. It's a Science Olympiad, similar situation. And then 11-194 is Chocowinity Middle, February 8th through 11th. And that's 12 students from Chocowinity and 2 from P.S. Jones going to an academy program they've got in Atlanta. And the fees have been waived for the most part. And this is a activity that the principals feel like will be very beneficial for their students. So we'd like to ask for your approval for all 3 of those.
Where's Cedar Rock Park? Is that in North Carolina?
Where is it?
It's right outside of Burlington.
Okay. I know
Yeah.
where that is.
We don't have the address on
In
there.
fabulous Snow Camp, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Snow camp.
I'd never heard of the Snow Camp.
Okay, anybody have any questions with Dr. Phipps on these field trips? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Second.
Got a motion, second. All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, now going down to discussion, no action. Capital update, Mr. Stan Hudson.
As Stan is coming up, I want to publicly thank him, his staff, and several of our custodians that were out right after the snow. And they were shoveling hard, working hard to make sure, and I knew that we were going to have a hard freeze. I mean, it got down, I think I woke up either Friday or Saturday morning, the real temperature was 2 degrees. And I knew we had some issues, but they were out working on pipes and making sure that heaters were working. So while a lot of us had the opportunity to stay warm in a house, we had employees that were out working hard, and I just want you to know how much we appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
And
And
scraping
that goes to my
parking
guys
lots.
too. It's not just me, it's my staff. There's a lot of hard-working staff dedicated to the school system. So,
Where would you like to start, sir?
Capital update, it's titled 1718 Capital Projects.
Yes, sir.
We completed 2 projects over the Christmas holidays, the VCT in the gym corridor at Southside High School. That was completed by Tyndall's Home Improvements on 12/28 for the budgeted amount of $7,000. Project number 2 is Southside Wall is still exterior wall in the cafeteria. That project is still undergoing. We should have the final designs this Friday. He promised to have it by this Friday on the 12th. So hopefully we can proceed back with getting that repaired and the glass storefront put back in, because that's a very cold wall. Other one, the next project on the list is Plant Operations Office HVAC. Mr. Dan sent me a text message after I sent that out today to Miss Lisa that they would do them next week. They had the units in stock, everything was here, and they would start on the one here and at the one in central office, which is on line 9. They were planning to start on those next week. They've been swamped, of course, with heating issues in everybody's residence, so I told them they were definitely more important. Ours are working at this time. Line 11, Chocowinity Primary's awning, pre-K. G.W. Walker and Son completed that on the 25th. And awning on the second grade connecting over, that was also completed by by G.W. Walker on the 28th. And both of those awnings are substantial awnings. They are very, very nice. Probably the nicest awnings we have. And that's all I have, unless y'all have questions on that.
We're still waiting for the money for the projects that are listed, I think, under yellow.
Yeah, everything that's under it, yes, sir.
And we're waiting for that from the commissioner, so there's just not anything we can do except be in a holding pattern until we get the funds for that.
When you say we're waiting, I know what waiting means, but haven't they approved that?
I was told it had to go through the local government commission.
I thought they bypassed that when they took the money out of the funds that they moved over.
I thought that, but then I was told again that we had to wait until, that probably wouldn't happen until January. I'll follow back up again, but that's where we are with those.
Okay.
Stan, I just want to say, the ed tech is really looking good.
Well, thank you.
I think they did they did wonderful, wonders for that entrance there. It really looks good over there.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Does anyone have any other more questions for Stan at this time? Okay.
There's another page too, I won't read it to you. That's basically what we did over the holidays and working with the snow. I will talk about the top part. We did have 3 HVAC units to fail over this extreme cold weather. One was at Shakopee Primary School that fed rooms 414 and 415. In our 400 building, the other two units are at Snowden. One is in administration and the other one is in room 500. Both of those units are equipped with heat strips, and they do have heat, and they are at temperature today. They have been the whole weekend. We've been watching them. Everything's there. We did decide, Dr. Phipps and I, and Willie Mack talked about it, and decided to move on with Chocowinty Primary, is getting it replaced. That has been done. We sent out a RFP via email to 2 local contractors and got prices back, and we proceeded with the lowest one, which was Advanced Air Solutions, and it has been installed and completed in the amount of $8,600 that came from the maintenance fund. So in the future, I'm going to come back and ask if we can take this from capital or somewhere else, because my maintenance budget has been hit hard. So
You want your money back.
yeah, I'm going to need it for general operations, because we find a lot of ice melt and everything else. So
And we didn't think we could go a 2 or 3 week stretch without having heat there, so we felt like we needed to go ahead and move on that.
and the rest of that is just basically a little dictation of what we did and what we did while we were out, while y'all were out, and while we were working. So, any questions?
Now, did you say, or maybe I misunderstood, there was no busted pipes, anything?
We had one frozen coil at Southside that we were able to repair that's dictated here. It was up in top of the gym.
Okay.
That one, it was the louvers didn't close all the way on that 3-degree night, and the air blowing through there froze it, but we were able to repair it at no cost other than our labor. And we repaired the louver. It's operational now. We had a faucet at P.S. Jones Mechanical Room, and I think we've got a outside hose bib faucet, one of those frost-proof ones supposedly, that froze and busted, that we had to cut water off this morning too, so.
Don't it have a lifetime guarantee?
Yeah, I think the foot valve probably didn't close and let it drain
Exactly.
like it's supposed to, so.
Right.
That's usually what it
Or that nice clay that we have out there probably didn't let the water drain out, one or the two, but
Gotcha.
anyway. I think all in all, we did very well to, keep it all up, and none of our units were designed for 2 and 3 degrees. And especially the minus that it showed at P.S. Jones and John Small, it showed minus 3 degree on our system when I came in Saturday morning. So it was cold.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Any questions?
Thanks, Sam.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Teacher contract update, Mr. Dunn?
I just want to make the board aware that Dr. Phipps and I will be attending a meeting on the 17th with all the superintendents and assistant superintendents in charge of human resources in the eastern part of the state, basically to bring different plans together. The idea is that for once, instead of competing with each other, we're cooperating with each other so that each school won't be trying to undercut the other with different contract terms that we have to have in place starting this year. So once we meet with them, bring back to our folks in the county, and then bring a recommendation for you guys for approval in the future.
Okay. Any questions? If not, I'm gonna let you continue on. I think
Okay.
you're next on the agenda again.
Yes, sir. The, right before, or between, I guess, Thanksgiving and the winter break, several of our media folks had asked myself and Dr. Phipps about revising the policy, Board Policy 3335, instructional use of videos. And the main area that came up during the course of the conversation was about the fact that a lot of the elementary schools, the current policy says that if you're a K-5, the only movie that you can show an elementary child, and by the way, let me make sure I'm clarifying something. This is movies shown in the media center as part of a book study. Now, certainly, we still have rules in place that if I'm a classroom teacher and I'm showing a video of some sort, that there's a procedure for me to go through. It needs to be a video that's approved. I have to go through my principal. All that's still the same. But the bigger issue for our media folks was if we're reading, the 5th graders are reading a book, for example, then the movie that may be tied to the book is more likely going to be PG and not G. But based on our current policy, I wouldn't be able to show the movie that goes along with the book. So the question was, could we do something to possibly revise this? Was there an appetite to revise it in any way? So what you have that I think Lisa shared with you on board docs, and I also have paper copies, it might be easier to just compare the two, is one stab at a recommended policy for what we currently have is in the gray, and the second page is in the red. That's what we would possibly revise.
That's on page 3 of the handout that's attached on the board docs, if you want to look at it there.
And as you can see, in the grade currently, for example, our policy says that K-5 students rated G, yes, no to all the rest. If we were to revise this policy based on the recommendation of the media specialists, then we would change that to K2 would remain G only. P5 would be PG, yes, with signed parental permission. And of course, no for PG-13 and no for rated R. Then the second level is our 6-8 students. Currently, G movies, yes. Currently, PG with signed parental permission, and PG-13, no, R, no. The recommended change was PG movies, yes, without signed parental permission, PG-13, yes, with signed parental permission. And then for the grade 9 through 12, G and PG were all both yes. PG-13 was yes with signed. It was just changing PG-13 to without, and rated R movies, yes, with signed parental. Of course, for rated R, we're talking about documentaries, things related, and again, we're not talking about just showing these at random. We're talking about tied to a curriculum, and they still have to go through the supervisor's permission. That hasn't changed. The bottom part, paragraph, even though it's in red, is exactly the same in the gray in terms of the process. Certainly not married to this, open to suggestions and anything feel free to throw
And
in.
they're asking for action tonight. Wanted you to look at it and just get a sense of how you felt you wanted to move, if you wanted to move at all. And this comes from our media folks that are asking us to take a look at it.
That's what I want to know. Who you talking, I mean, media, obviously, people.
It came from the media specialists at all of our
each individual
schools.
school?
Mhm. It started with a couple of media folks contacted me, and then I contacted all of our media specialists and said, this has been brought up, is this something that you're concerned about, or you have suggestions? Sent out a couple of variations of revised policies, and sent it to our principals and said, this is kind of what we're looking at, and have shaped it from there. But we can, this first reading, we can certainly shape it even further.
Do you know how this compares to what other school districts, not that it would matter, but what other school districts might be doing or not doing?
I don't.
I can pull that for you. We can
I mean,
take a look at
I don't even know that would matter, if we decide our own self, but,
Right. No, I don't know
Me and
that,
you
but
thinking about the same. I was thinking, has the School Board Association attorneys
Yeah.
looked at this, or have we had any feedback from them, or are we doing this basically on our own?
Well, the original policy, I'm assuming, was a school board association policy, since all of ours tend to be.
Sure.
And I think, generally speaking, when it comes to school board policies, this is the section that is, much like the teacher contract. You have the bookends that are the state law, and then you have the middle part that each individual county and school system can decide upon.
Okay.
So,
And I know there may be some concern with people when they see the rated R movies, yes, with signed parental permission, but I do remember several years ago when my children were in high school, there are certain documentary and video spots from the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement. There's different things that contain violence and things that we may not want our 5-year-old to see, but I think it's important for a high school student to be able to relate, to see the real thing. So, and they weren't allowed to show those. And so I can see why that would, because these all have to be approved, so it's not just any R-rated movie.
that is correct. But I'm certainly open to any feedback between now and next board meeting.
well, if you find out anything others are doing, plus what the chairman was
We'll
just
find out.
asking about.
I'd be glad to.
Because I understand what Carolyn is saying. There are things, but a lot of times situations like this, we start out with good intentions, but we end up going down another road altogether once you open that door.
I think you open the door for
I do too.
too much.
Yep.
Especially when you start doing the R-rated stuff.
And I'm just saying, when you come back.
PG-13 movies now,
Just like.
Well, I agree with
R-rated movies were when I was in high.
I agree with Carolyn, though, and I would add to it that anything that's R-rated needs to be approved by you.
Right. It would have to have a
It needs to go all
long
the way
chain
up
of
the chain.
command.
R doesn't mean what we think R means.
Well, I think Malcolm X is a good example of that. It's rated R, but it's a historical documentary on, well, it's a little bit of poetic license into it, but, I mean, it's a good movie about his life, and that would be a good example of that.
And that's all I was saying. I know what we intend, but then we seem to always get
Right.
down another road.
Exactly. That's
We
right.
open the door.
All right.
It just gets
We'll
worse
bring-
and
we'll bring
worse.
that back.
But we got time to talk about it.
Right, okay. All right. Let's see here. Go down. Okay. All right. Dr. Phillips.
5.4 is just to let you know, we have tried to work with North Carolina A&T to establish a partnership on a variety of different projects. and they came to us, spoke with me and Mark a couple of weeks ago. They want to start an MSA program with a cohort in Beaufort County, and they're going to be meeting with some of our folks on Thursday of next week. And we just wanted you to know that we're working with them to try to establish that. It's a program that's similar to a lot of the other MSA programs. They're competing like a lot of the other universities are. They have a heavy online component to theirs, but it's the first time that we've had anything formal that we could tie ourselves with North Carolina A&T, and I just wanted you to be aware of that.
All right. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion that we go into closed session.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11, A parentheses, 1 parentheses, to present disclosure of confidential personnel files under General Statute 115C-321.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Had a motion and a second. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Nope.
All right, we're back into open session. First item on the agenda is to approve the personnel agenda that was presented shortly ago.
So moved.
Motion, second. All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Dr. Phipps, give you the updates.
The calendar, we don't have attached. We'll get that attached for you, but I think we'll figure that out. The 22nd of January at Ed Tech, we'll be doing our board retreat for January. That'll start at 5 o'clock. And then the 23rd will be our January monthly board meeting. And then we will have to pepper dates in February and March for budget, but we haven't got anything put together yet on that. But as we've always done, that'll be the heavy work that we do in the month of February and March.
Okay, I'll let you just continue right on. Board member updates. Anybody have anything they'd like to bring us up to speed on?
Just mentioned, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, he mentioned a retreat, and then you mentioned the agenda for it. Are you going to send that out earlier so we'll see what topics we're going to have on there? So we, if there's anything somebody might want to add, if that's okay?
I certainly will. We'll get that out tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. Well, don't have to be that early.
No, I've got it, just haven't sent it out to anybody.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
There were several awards in the local Tri-County little magazine they sent out, and we should all be very proud because several of our students won those, were recognized in there out of all the districts that Tri-County Communications supports. I meant to bring it with me, and I walked right out of the door and forgot it, but.
We'll make sure we do that with student recognition. We do it at the end of the month.
Right. I still have it at the house.
You get that to me, would you?
Yeah, I will.
Mark, did you get a date for the minority hiring committee? Did you write that down that day? I was lost my calendar.
We just said we would tentatively meet in January. We didn't pick a date.
Okay, well, we need to get a date because we wanted to start that with this board. So do y'all have anything open?
The 30th or 31st?
The 30th or the 31st?
That's a Tuesday or Wednesday?
Okay.
You can find another date if that works for you. That's the only two open dates I've got.
Is that good for you?
Which one did you like?
Neither one, but I would accept the 30th.
There's a better date, take it, that's fine.
The 30th, the
Okay.
30th.
I can make 30th.
Yeah, the 30th.
Okay.
What time?
Till 5?
Okay. So that'll be January the 30th at 5 PM here in the boardroom. Okay?
And I'm gonna try to make that meeting back for the retreat. About how long do you think that's going to
No more than
last?
2 hours, and if we need
think
to,
it'll
I'm
be
sure there'll be some
about 2 hours?
carryover, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a group meeting in Greensboro that day, so
Okay.
I'll try to get back.
All right. Let's see. Any other updates?
I don't have anything.
Okay. All right.
Meeting date in February, regular meeting would be the 13th and 27th, is that right?
We've been doing the 1st and 3rd, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1st and 3rd, okay, so 6th
6th and the 20th.
Okay.
That's February?
Of course, there'll be budget meetings on capital and regular budget that'll be in there somewhere. We just haven't got those scheduled yet.
The first and the what?
The 6th and the 20th.
Oh, they changed it.
Okay, all right, yep. All right. And Dr. Phipps, you have any updates? Okay. All right, and the moment we've been waiting for, we need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Second. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.